All right, so calling the meeting to order. This meeting is being recorded. If anyone is intending to make an audio or video recording of this meeting, they should notify me at this time. And with that, do we have any public participation? Okay, very quiet over in the public. All right, we will move on to the approval of meeting minutes from December the 12th.
Motion to approve the regular meeting minutes from December 12th.
Okay, is there any further discussion? Seeing none. All in favor?
Aye.
I don't think there were any opposed, so. All right, let's go to the principal's reports. Ms. Couette?
Hi everyone. I put two things in your folders, the handbook and the program of studies. First things for the handbook, there are just two edits that we made. And this was also reviewed by legal counsel and the school council. Page 43 has an addition to the code of conduct regarding closing or tampering with the hallway fire doors. Middle schoolers love to touch those. It's really hard to put them back up. My arm isn't skinny enough to get in there. And page 62, there's additional language on school election expectations, like we're not to barter for votes, like give out candy bars and things like that. So we had our legal counsel help with the language on those two, and there will also be future updates to Title IX language that will be coming in our future, but that's going to go through subcommittee. So I just wanted to let you know about that, and that link is in the memo that I sent earlier last week. In regards to the program of studies, you so gratefully helped us finalizing the exploratory classes for grade 7 in the past, and we have been thinking about ways we can pilot new elective opportunities for grade 8. Of course, this would all have to be part of not just the budget process, but how a schedule may or may not have to be changed depending on what happens in our future with the budget. Due to staffing and class enrollment, 8th graders generally currently right now enroll in a world language course, and then they're able to take an elective with the art staff. We would like to pilot some new 45-day electives that our core teachers, our classroom teachers would pilot, so students have other opportunities to work with core content staff that would introduce them to connected high school offerings. Some of which I know you might be interested in is money and metrics, some finance related courses, intro to oceanography. There's also a course like this at the high school, journalism, intro to environmental science, and current events. So that's a portion of what we're adding to the program of studies. We don't know yet if we will be able to run those, but I want to put them in there for your approval so you have time to read them and think about them. Like I said, it will all be determined by our final budget, but I want to present it today to you. And lastly, we would like to continue to honor our accelerated math program as we utilize pre-algebra and algebra curricula. We know there's research to support a positive correlation in achievement in mathematics. This course pathway is the only way to guarantee access to advanced mathematics courses in high school. For example, AP Calculus, without having to collapse or combine courses in high school or double up courses. We don't have the same constraints in ELA, so we would like to take a step back from having accelerated ELA because our data is not showing a correlation to higher achievement, nor is there current research to support this type of tracking in 8th grade. The curriculum is not significantly different. The classes are open to all students, and we know that removing tracking to the best of our ability can also have a positive effect on the entire school body. Students who demonstrate readiness for more advanced ELA course offerings will still have the opportunity to do this in high school, to take honors and AP courses in the high school with this step back from having accelerated ELA in the middle school. So those are the few changes that we're hopeful for, but those would need your approval.
On the handbook changes, you've noted future updates to Title IX language to be reviewed by appropriate subcommittee. Are we actually in a position to vote that then if we're still changing Title IX?
No, Becky was just alerting you that once the subcommittee is ready to make formal presentations to the committees, should the committees approve the policy changes, she will then need to update that section with whatever the approved policy is.
That will be the only additional update without me coming back to this table.
Okay.
Because it will have been approved as a policy if you agree that she doesn't have to come back once the policy is approved, just to add it.
Okay. So you're looking for approval on the other two
Yep.
elements? Okay. I feel like we should put this separately, the handbook and the
Sure.
program of studies. So, committee members, do you have questions or thoughts about what Principal Coed has said in reference to both these?
Mrs. Scott, have you weighed whether or not we can do these in terms of the proposed teachers that we'll be reviewing tonight?
So it will all depend on what schedule we utilize, because these additional courses are going to be held by teachers that we already have in the building, that have expertise in these areas. There wouldn't be any impact to the budget.
And my second question, if I may, is it all or nothing in terms of if we approve all of these, would you only implement them if there's room for all of them to go?
That's a great question. I don't have that answer. I'm hoping to work with all of them, but if there's budget constraints, there's schedule constraints.
Okay. Any other questions? I do think it'd be better to separate the votes on these. So I'd be looking for a motion first about the handbook and then second about the program of studies.
I'll make a motion that we approve the additions to the middle school handbook as presented by Nicole Coed.
Do I have a second? Lucas. All right, any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
I'll make a motion that we approve the proposed courses as presented by Nicole Coed. I'll second that motion.
All right, any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
No negative? Okay.
Thank you.
Did you have something, Ms. Coed, about the donations or anything?
Nope, I'm all set.
Okay.
That's just a standing item.
All right, so Ms. Gill?
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My first update is to provide you with one on our 8-period schedule feasibility. Unfortunately, given the unpredictability of the budget and potential cuts, because our course selection process does begin next month, we have made the executive decision to put that schedule change on hold at this time. So next school year, we will plan at this time on having a 7-period schedule, no block scheduling. I have 2 requests for your approval today. The first is for an out-of-state field trip. Our art teachers would like to bring our art classes to the Met in New York City on April 11th. They're working on final costs. They're waiting to hear back from a couple different bus companies. But of course, assistance or fundraising would be available to students who wish to go but cannot afford the trip on their own.
Okay.
Are you looking for a motion right now?
Yes, please.
I will make a motion to approve the art field trip to the Met on April 11th.
Second.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Thank you.
No opposed?
And then my last item is a donation request on behalf of the Bedeau family in memory of Jeremy Bedeau, who's a 2015 graduate of ours. The family would like to donate $3,000 to our carpentry program, which Jeremy was a part of, and $3,000 to our special education department for our 2 programs to use as they see fit for programming or supplies or extracurriculars, materials, projects, things like that, again, in his memory. Jeremy was a beloved student of ours. Those of us who've been around for a little while remember him fondly. He unfortunately passed in an accident a couple years ago.
Okay. Do I have a motion to accept the donations?
I'll make a motion that we accept the $3,000 carpentry donation and $3,000 donation on behalf of, in memory of Jeremy Bedeau. And just ask that Principal Gill send her
With thanks.
thank you.
Always.
Do I have a second? Okay. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Okay, thank you, and I'll turn it over to Carissa for our student updates.
All right. First off, I'd like to say thank you for approving the field trip. I'm going on that with my art class, so that's going to be fun. We had a lot of things that happened over holidays, like we did holidays in Halifax. Also, winter sports have been going on for a while. Coming up, we have the next CMAS that a lot of our students are attending, which is exciting. We're not hosting it this time, though. And then we also have midterms coming up, so everyone's a little stressed. But we are doing tutoring to help with any students that need extra help, because those are half days, so we're staying after for like an extra hour to help tutor any kids that need it. So we don't have a lot because of the holidays, but it's a short update. But
What did you do at holidays in Halifax?
What?
What did you all do at holidays in Halifax?
People help set up, like put all like the bags on the street and other things like that,
That's cool.
and help clean too.
Very good. Thank you
for that.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you, Carissa.
Yeah.
That's all, thank you.
All right. Sarah, I think we're on to finance and operations.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. In your packets for tonight was the financial report. I'm going to run through the financial report. On the top of page 2, you'll see that there's a new line for special ed settlements. They were budgeted for in the legal line previously, and so we're paying them out of an appropriate line now. They were commingled with the regular ed funds. We're separating that out. Halfway down the page, you can see the pre-K clerical budget is overspent, but that's budgeted as part of the clerical line on page 11. On page 3, the middle school long-term subs were budgeted for in the regular sub line, but are paid out of the appropriate line. On page 4, the high school's long-term sublines are the same as middle school. Again, I budgeted it as one number last year, but they're being paid out of the appropriate line. There's new payroll lines for the extended school year. That's on the bottom of page 4 and the top of page 5. Those numbers were budgeted for in the tuition line, but paid out of the extended school year salary lines. On page 6, I was moving instructional hardware to the correct line. On page 8, I moved after-school supervision to a new line. On page 9, high school grounds, we are paying that. It was budgeted in the maintenance of buildings account, but it's actually the grounds, so we're paying it out of a grounds line. On page 10, the health and life insurance, this is something that I explained last spring, that there was an issue with the system, our financial system, when we moved to an in-house payroll, and it was double counting the health and the life insurance. We believe two things. One is that after this report was printed and submitted to you, I fixed the July to December double costs, and then we believe we have fixed the problem, and I will know as of the January 14th payroll whether we were successful in that, so I will update you on that at our next meeting. On the rest of page 10 was moving things into the correct lines as it is spent. On page 12 and 13 for special ed costs, there's a lot of moving parts, and the special ed bookkeeper maintains a separate spreadsheet tracking special ed contracted services, tuitions, and transportation. The spreadsheet that she updated today shows an overall surplus of about $550,000 at this time.
Can we go back to the health insurance?
Yes.
So right now, if I'm reading correctly, we're theoretically in the hole 700 grand
Right.
on the health insurance. Is that related to the double counting?
That is the double count. No, it
Okay.
is the double counting. So from July to December, it has charged the health insurance to the health insurance line twice.
And it won't let us reverse those?
No, reversing it is a process. I have to print out reports and then change it and do a journal entry in the system and upload, and it takes time, and I quite honestly don't have a lot of time. So
Right.
last week, I actually did the reversals, and we fixed what we believe is the issue in the account. And so on your next report, you will see the better numbers, the actual accurate numbers, and we won't be creating that issue going forward.
Okay.
But again, we believe we fixed it for the January 14th payroll. I will let you know if we were successful.
Okay.
Any questions about the financial report? Moving on to grants. You have in your packet a list of grants. Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 53A says that we can accept grants or gifts given for educational purposes with the approval of school committee. So in order for us to spend the money, we're supposed to record that we've approved it by school committee. So in your packet was a printout of a spreadsheet. At the top of the spreadsheet were the grants that I brought to you already this year that you approved on October 17th. There's a list of grants. Would you like me to read through them?
I don't think so.
Okay. There's a list of grants totaling $2,306,758.44 for your approval.
All right. Does anybody want to discuss that, or can I get a motion?
I'll make a motion to accept the grants.
All right.
Second.
All right. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
And any opposed? No. Okay.
Moving on to the next item. First student is our transportation vendor. My predecessor, Christine Healy, went out to bid in the spring of 2020, and Silver Lake Regional came to an agreement with First Student, who was the low bidder, for a 5-year contract. And the 5-year contract has two option years, an option year 6 and year 7. One of the things I will say about this is it was just an absolute stroke of luck timing that the contract happened during the COVID, the beginning of COVID, and that the rates that were locked in were the rates that were locked in. So if you take a look, we had a 3.51% increase or a 3.5% increase across the first 5 years of the contract. That a lot of districts that are going out to bid for transportation contracts are seeing things in double-digit increases from year to year because the proposed year 6 number is such a small increase. I would recommend that the school committee exercise the option, the contract option to contract with First Student for year 6, which is next year.
4.5% is a good deal. Can I ask a question?
Michael?
How does this compare to other vendors?
I can send you a newspaper article where Dartmouth signed a contract with a different vendor, and they were shocked at a 26% increase. So there's two things.
She's not going to have the answer to that
No,
because
no.
we've not formally bid it. So she's taking the temperature based on the deals
Yeah,
she's seen around.
but I'm just curious, like, I know that the percentage is 4.5%, but what is like how much we're paying per route or anything like that? You know, like, we have almost $3 million for the bus routes, but a similar size district, is that typical?
No, this is better
Okay.
than what districts are seeing, and it's better because the contract went out to bid before the pandemic and was signed in the early days of the pandemic. The increase in transportation costs across the state has been outrageous, and we are super lucky to have had the numbers that we have had for 5 years. So, with transportation contracts, it is a contract that we are required to go out to bid for, and my understanding was First Student was the only company that bid on the contract last time.
It was. Gordon Mann.
We can extend it for 2 years?
Yes,
Would we be voting to extend for just year
just
6?
year 6.
All right, and then we'd vote again next year. Okay,
And I would
Dean?
caution that we extend it longer than 1 year, because one of the things that we had negotiated 5 years ago was the new busing. There was some new buses that were added to the fleet, if you would. But I guess my question regarding if we were to make any changes, for instance, Tier 2 eliminating late buses, are any of those things items that need to be negotiated with the bus company further, or do we just have a contract with them that they will provide our busing for the district?
I'm going to use the agricultural school bus runs as an example. As part of the bid, there is built into the bid 3 different bus runs, one for Norfolk County Agricultural, one for Plymouth County Agricultural, and one for South Shore Road Tech. That was built into the bid, but we don't use 3 buses, we use 1 bus. And that bus does both Norfolk and Bristol Aggie.
Thank you.
So,
Mark?
to clarify that question though, if we elect in the future budget to eliminate one of the services, say late buses, is it going to affect the bid?
So, for example, last year, we reduced the number of days the late buses came. It is just part of the contract.
It's in
that
the
we-
contract.
Yes.
And the last question is, what was our reimbursement rate for this year from the state for transportation?
That hasn't come out yet.
No, for the current year.
I can pull that up, it'll take me a minute.
65%.
It was approximately 700.
65%.
65, 70? Okay, thank you. That's close enough.
I'll make a motion that we approve year 6 of the optional bus contract with First Student.
Kyle, second. Lucas, all right. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? All right, and then no opposed. All right, Sarah?
FY23, so the next thing on the agenda for me is the corrective action plan. The FY23 audit was complete. I wrote the corrective action plan for the FY23 audit. We had the same issues with the FY23 audit that we did with the FY22 audit. There was no time for me to correct things that happened a year and a half before I got here. And so when I wrote the corrective action plan and submitted that, it was, I'm going to use the word rejected. I don't think that's the technical term. I was asked for additional information. One of the things I was asked for was a copy of the Silver Lake Regional School District Federal Grants Manual, of which none existed when I got the letter back in September. Me and my team and I have written a federal grants manual and submitted it to DESE by the December 23rd deadline, and I'm just waiting a response on where we are with the corrective action plan.
Okay. All right, I think with that, Dr. Clifford.
Hi, 2 things tonight. One is a curriculum and assessment and instruction update, and also an MCAS update. So I'll start with the curriculum instruction and assessment update. The first piece is that I'll talk about district-wide information, secondary information, and elementary information. So as far as district-wide information, as part of the K-12 curriculum review cycle, we have formed a math steering committee that's K-12. The Math Steering Committee is made up of 2 groups, a K-6 core review team and a 7-12 core review team. The K-6 core review team is conducting a core review, looking comprehensively at different high-quality instructional materials. That's K-6. They had their first meeting Tuesday. We have a 7-12 core review team, which will discuss and determine curriculum instruction and assessment topics to review, including reviewing and selecting high-quality materials for grades 7 and 8 specifically. And that group met for the first time today. So K-6, we're looking for reviewing programs to adopt for next year, as we are for 7 and 8. The Math Steering Committee, which is the larger sort of overarching group, meets 2 more times this spring, And the K through 6 group, as I mentioned, started meeting for the first time Tuesday, and will meet several times during the spring, as will the 7 through 12 group. And will present to school committee end of May, beginning of June. The second piece district-wide is a literacy needs assessment update. All focus groups, inventories, and surveys have been completed by all 4 districts. And a report from the Hill from Literacy will be discussed with the district literacy leadership team on January 23rd. And on March 6th, that group will meet to draft a district literacy plan based on the report and other pieces of information. So those are updates, district-wide updates. Secondary information, secondary school information. Student competency determination, as we all have heard, MCAS is not a requirement. Students must meet the local district graduation requirements. Participation on MCAS is required by federal and state law. The Adams, Coplic, and Seal by Literacy will still continue and use MCAS scores for qualifying. Elementary information, just to give a quick update on what's happening at the elementary level. Writing benchmarks have been completed, meaning students have completed common assessments in writing, K through 6. They've had a beginning of year meeting among the grade level teachers to look at that information, calibrate, and use that information to inform instruction. Star reading and math and DIBELS assessments happened for beginning of year and now are happening for middle of year, and data meetings are happening throughout the schools. Will happen between January 27th and February 7th. MCAS windows have been created as far as the calendar for MCAS assessments at the K through 6 level. And also, as I spoke about at this meeting, about the multilingual newcomer and HOMA support grant, which Silver Lake was awarded funds for that. Kingston was also awarded funds for that and approved at their school committee meeting. That grant includes funding for translation and interpretation fees, professional development for faculty, staff, and also outreach to families, instructional materials to help support multilingual learners, and math and early literacy. So that is my presentation for tonight, and I'd like to turn it over
So let me pause you and ask a couple of questions. If I recall correctly, when we were reviewing MCAS scores and we were talking about reading and literacy, I may get this wrong, but I feel like I recall that we thought our curriculum in grade 3 from years prior had not been as effective or as strong, and that was paying negative dividends down the line. Am I, number one, remembering that correctly? And if I am remembering that correctly, where do we stand on that curriculum?
That's a good question. Yes, your memory is correct. So as part of the curriculum review cycle, which I talked about in the fall with the committee, the first year we're looking at math, so this year we're looking at math. Because our Envisions contract expires, and so next year we need a math curriculum. But next year we'll begin the first year for the English language arts piece. So next year in September we'll begin a curriculum review process for English language arts, where we'll do a similar process to what we're doing this year as far as looking at a core program review, where we'll look at high quality instructional materials that, based on the state database called Curate, has programs they recommend that meet across all categories. So we'll begin a similar process with that next year.
So if we don't love the curriculum right now, but we're not beginning to address it till next year, are we doing anything in the meantime to deal with the shortfalls?
Yes. So we're doing several things. Many of the things I mentioned previously, professional development around Orton-Gillingham, which is phonics-based instruction around literacy K through 3. Other professional development pieces of writing, as I mentioned, the writing pieces that we're looking at, the common assessments. So those are just some quick and simple things that we're doing, but we are looking at literacy and changing our curriculum based on what we find that the data is telling us and instructional practices that we need to change. But also keeping in mind both financially and with implementing curriculum reviews, what I want to do is keep an eye on how we can make improvements, but at the same time not asking teachers to implement several curriculums at the same time that are all new. So we're doing that, but we definitely are making sure that we make changes.
Are we not phonics-based in our early reading?
We are, but overall, we need more, I think, more focus on making sure that we're teaching things that are, include all of the phonemic awareness and all of those things, and we're doing that throughout all 3 schools and doing the assessments to that. But I think ongoing professional development is something that all districts could use and we could use here too.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions before we move on to the science discussion?
I would just ask to make a point of clarification. MCAS is not required for competency determination. MCAS is still going to be administered, and participation is still the expectation of the state. And we will still be required to make sure students participate in the MCAS test.
Yeah, I would further back that up with however you want to look at it. The school is going to get evaluated based on MCAS scores. So just because students will not have MCAS as a determining factor in their graduation does not mean that there won't be rankings, there won't be discussions, that there won't be funding tie-ups, that there won't be the potential of state intervention or oversight based on those scores, et cetera, et cetera. So the only thing that was at stake in that was whether a very small handful of students who were not passing the test would have other means whereby to graduate, but not much else has changed. Okay, should we go to the science discussion?
Thank you.
All right, I'd like to turn it over to Scott Farrell. There you are, Scott.
Yeah.
Okay, there you go.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you. So I'll start off with the first 2 points on this memo, which deal with the middle school. There's a lot going on at the middle school. As you know, the middle school MCAS is transitioning. It's going to be a more performance-based type of assessment. So a really big jump in how we look at kids performing on MCAS. So one of the things that we've done, started in 6th grade and 7th and 8th grade jumped on board, is we're transitioning to the Open SciEd curriculum. We have a lot of grant funding to support that at all those 3 years, specifically in 7th and 8th, which I oversee. It's a big shift. It's a big shift in instructional strategies and in instructional moves for teachers. So it is something that requires a lot of support. So each year, 6 teachers take 4 days of professional development training over that course of the 3 years so that they get really adept at what are the expectations, ensure that they are assessing students properly, ensure that they're moving towards the intended outcomes of the curriculum. So, and in addition to that, we have the OSC community, which is funded through the 1-8 Foundation. They do on-site visits to our teachers, our classrooms, provide them with feedback, provide me with feedback about how the program is running, and the people who come in are all individuals, teachers who have taught this curriculum in the past, so they know well what are some of the hurdles and what are some of the high points and low points of it. So they give us a lot of great feedback in that way. And again, obviously the minutia, but really some of the important parts is instructional resources. As we move towards this, we do need new instructional resources. There's a lot of consumables. There's also a lot of durable goods, so those are paid for out of the grant. Those support the specific activities that we're realigning our instructional strategies towards. So this new curriculum is on the Curate website, so it is validated by the Mass Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. In addition, DESE has put together a bunch of crosswalk documents to help support the transition, to say, because OSC is based off of NGSS, our state standards are a little different. The state has put out some ways of looking at how to make sure that you're meeting all the state standards if you're teaching OSC. But aside from that, Massachusetts is really pushing schools to go with the Open SciEd curriculum. And then additionally, and this was a little harder this year because Massachusetts did not release any of the 8th grade questions. So teachers did do a deep dive into data analysis of the 8th grade test. Without questions, it's a little vague as to what were some of the outcomes and why, but nonetheless, we could look at standards where we didn't perform well, assess whether or not those were things that we missed during this transition, because part of the transition There are some things that may get shortchanged a little bit, other things that get covered in more depth as we move towards this, but that's well known throughout the OSCE implementation with all schools who are going through it. So part of the support we get is an understanding of how are you building out this transition? Are you ensuring that you're covering everything you're covering? And so the feedback we get and the support we get from the 1-8 and the OSCE community ensures that we're doing the best we can to ensure we're getting everything in the years that we're teaching. So we're doing that. And then the second one, and the former K-6 curriculum coordinator and I last year took a training through DESE on the new state assessment that we're moving towards in 5th and 8th grade. So this year it's a hybrid. It's going to be half old MCAS, half new MCAS, and next year it'll be a full transition. And so what I did is I brought together the teachers 3 through 8 on November 5th for a half day. We went over what this means, what this looks like. Most of these teachers hadn't seen this yet. Some of them had. I know the former K-6 coordinator had done some initial training with them. Basically what it was is sort of, we started off with the reason of why we're moving towards this, what did it look like, why is this going there, and then we practiced some ways of looking at it online so the teachers got a sense of what does this new assessment look like, how do we practice with it, how do we play with it, and then I gave them the resources that they could access for both the online versions as well as paper-based versions that they should give in class to help prepare students for, again, just a whole different modality of test taking. And so hopefully the teachers are starting to work on that. I know in 7th and 8th grade, our plan is sometime in the end of January, beginning of February, to do an actual paper-based performance task inside the classroom, which mirrors the expectations on the new MCAS.
So when you say half old, half new, are you referring to every student taking the test will have 50% of the assessment is the soon-to-be past way of doing it, and 50% is the soon-to-be new way of doing it?
From my understanding, I don't know if it's exactly split, but they are going to be given some of the new questions. I believe it's one of the new questions because they're time-consuming, and then the rest of the test is going to be older type of questions. The old school, not the multiple choice, but the technology-enhanced multiple choice questions.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in the newer test, they're going to be doing performance assessment in a handwritten.
It's all on the computer.
I was going to say,
Yeah.
I'd be shocked if they were going back to handwritten.
So what they actually will do is they'll get a scenario, and the scenario is fairly unique, and it's almost like a scene out of something where they'll have students like, "Hey, Billy, I noticed you got a new scooter," and Billy's like, "Yeah, I did, and it's got a rechargeable battery," and okay, now we have to look at how much energy does it take to run the bike, and how long is the battery going to last, and the students will then go into an actual lab-based scenario in which they'll do some tests on that, gather data. From the data they gather, they'll then go and answer specific questions using the data they actually
And
got.
have they articulated how they're grading this?
That's a good question. That's still in its infancy as well, and that's why they're doing the pilot. So they've piloted this in the past, and they're looking at the metrics behind that and what are the outcomes, what does it look like, how do we grade it, and so they're continuing to hone that. It's been piloted.
So they haven't told you?
What's that?
They haven't really told you?
They haven't really told me, no, I haven't heard anything.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. So that was, again, like I said, that was given through 3rd through 8th grade. So they have all these tools now. They have my PowerPoint, all the access to the different links and the like. The nice thing is, and what was kind of weird, is when we went to the training with the state of Massachusetts, some of the actual practice questions are open-sided practice questions, are open-sided questions. So there was, I mean, it's like blended together. It did look like one thing. So it's a good feeling to know that what we're doing with open-sided is mirroring what we're going to see on the MCAS for that grade. And then in the high school, our physics teachers, one of the great things about that happened is we got back our, what was called the Old Edge Elastic. It's a pair assessment. It's a tool in which we build off assessments. We build all of our common assessments, our midterm, our final assessment on that. The nice thing about it, it's supported via an alignment to the standards, so that any questions we develop on that have a standard base to them. And so the outcome of the data, rather than teachers just making up questions and assuming they're standards aligned, these are vetted behind the scenes by peer assessment to be standards aligned, to be good quality questions. The teachers build out their assessments, and then they get a chance to look at the data. They'll individually look at the data, and then having the subscription district-wide, I get a chance to look at the data individually throughout classes and across all my teachers. And in that way, we get to see the areas of strength and weakness, how are different classes working, how are different teachers working, and from that feedback, we then, again, obviously make our adjustments. The difficulty is that the high school teachers don't have a lot of time to do this, so we fit it in as best we can, but they do meet fairly regularly to look at those common assessments. I think we've given 2 already, and we have our big midterm one coming up in a couple of weeks, which we'll do a really deep dive on.
Is this the second year we're doing common assessments?
So it's, I guess, it's second formal year in a way. I mean, science teachers had some prior to this. Again, not to say they were good or bad. Having the Edge Elastic platform and this I hate using the word peer assessment, sounds weird. Having the peer assessment platform has made it just, in my mind, that much more valid. So I think, like, over the past 2 years, I think I've gotten better data and a better look at how things are moving.
Okay. All right. Any questions for Mr. Farrell, folks? All right, Dr. Prue, I think you're up.
Thank you. So our first item tonight, in your packet, you'll see an update from Chief Holmes. In particular, he's asking us to consider putting the full-time, the middle school resource officer salary into the budget. And in fact, he and you'll hear tonight that we would support a full-time resource officer at the middle school. So I wanted you to be aware of that. Chief Holmes and the town administrator will be here at our joint meeting to answer any questions you may have, but I wanted you to be aware of that request.
Okay.
That's not currently in tonight's level service, is that correct? Just
No.
to clarify, thank you.
It is not. So if I may go on to the preliminary budget, I will begin by saying this was a group effort. The principals started by soliciting input from their staff in terms of needs. The principals put together their preliminary budgets. Sarah worked on a number of line items based upon sometimes trends, based upon contractual obligations, things of that nature, moved those over. We met a few times to refine that and to make sure that it was truly a level services budget. In addition, we already have made some tier 1 cuts to that level services budget, primarily in the form of things, supplies. You'll see that. I'm going to ask that that the committee please try to hold questions until the end in case we're going to answer those questions as we go along in order to save time and to make sure that we give all of this budget information the attention that it needs and deserves. With the level services budget, I can say that we make efforts to make sure that we're supporting our students' needs. We would be able to maintain class sizes and student-teacher ratios to a certain extent in many areas. And the level service budget would allow us to continue to try to support the strategy for district improvement. Interestingly enough, a 2% increase is not going to allow us to do those things. Even though we're talking about a 2% increase, the level service budget, as you'll find out, is more than 2%. And so while these are our goals, we recognize that what we're going to present to you tonight at the 2% increase that the school committee asked us to prepare is not going to allow us to do that. And it would require staffing cuts as well. So we have presented to you both a level services budget, which we believe is responsible and appropriate and helps us to serve our students and our communities. And we have also presented to you a potential 2% increased budget would look like. And we also have, we have tiered those proposed reductions if in fact we must decrease our budget to 2%. I'm going to, yep.
Just before you go into it, I'm just going to ask one question to have you hopefully answer it as you go along. I previewed this obviously ahead of time. If I understand correctly, the level services budget would constitute an 11.5% increase. And if I'm correct about that, at some point I'd like you to address what are the major buckets constituting the 11.5%?
Yes, will do.
Okay.
That's coming up.
All right.
So if you look through the line item budget that I put in the school committee folder, you'll notice that it looks dramatically different from last year. I'm creating a new Silver Lake chart of accounts for a number of reasons. One is to be in alignment with the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education chart of accounts. The other reason is, with the new chart of accounts, it'll allow me to fully utilize our financial software and pick out budget lines based on all sorts of criteria based on the pieces of the account numbers. This is a multi-step process. So we've created the FY26 budget with the new budget lines. That took from October through now. I will need to enter the new budget lines into our financial software. I expect that to take place in February through May. I need to upload the approved budget into the financial software in June, and we would go live on July 1st. I started with the principals and directors by giving a primer about spending money in schools. There are 6 ways a school district can spend money. We can spend money on professional salaries, clerical salaries, and other salaries. I apologize that it says custodians in there twice. Other salaries are custodians, substitutes, paras, things like that. You'll see that there's a line right through the middle of the list. Everything above the line is payroll and comes out of the business office. Everything below the line is accounts payable. And so when I spoke to the principals and directors about this, I said, when you put in budget requests, you're budgeting for contracted services, for supplies and materials, and for other expenditures. So these are the only ways that we can spend money as a school district. And then sorry, thought I clicked and I didn't click. The other change is the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education chart of accounts has broad categories. I spoke about these last March. I speak about them whenever I can to you. The broad categories for expenditures are district leadership and administration. We call those the 1,000 accounts. The 2,000s are instructional services. 3,000s are other school services. 4,000s operations and maintenance of physical plant. 5,000 are the fixed charges. That's where our benefits and benefits go in, so insurance is in there. 6,000s are community services. Very few school districts in Massachusetts use the 6,000 accounts. 7,000s are the acquisition, improvement, and replacement of fixed assets. So that's generally, we would use that for purchases of non-instructional equipment over $5,000. The 8,000 accounts are debt retirement. We don't use those, we don't budget those lines. And 9,000s are programs with other schools. So previously in Silver Lake, the 9,000 accounts were all of special ed, and 9,000 accounts are only supposed to be tuitions paid to other schools. And so our FY26 budget does that. Jill had asked me to add this slide to the presentation for you. If you take a look at this, there are four different quadrants on this slide. The top left-hand corner is the FY26 budget broken down by the thousands, by those broad categories on the left-hand side, and across the top, by whether it's a regular education expense, a special education expense, or a vocational education expense. On the bottom left-hand quadrant is the FY25 budget, set up in that exact same way. The top right-hand quadrant is the percent increase from FY26 to FY25 to FY26, and in the bottom right-hand quadrant is the amount of the increase from FY25 to FY26. So in our preliminary level service budget for FY26, the substitutes were increased based on our FY24 actuals. The estimate includes funds for the building-based subs. The middle school sublines have been increased by $30,000, and the high school sublines have been increased by $30,000 to match what our past spending has been. Our utilities were updated based on a 4-year average. The shared costs have been included but have not been voted. And homeless foster transportation, last year Silver Lake spent approximately $240,000 on homeless and foster care transportation, so I have put $255,000 in the proposed FY26 budget. So a summary, the school committee asked for a 2% increase for the Silver Lake Regional School District for FY26. A 2% increase on the FY25 budget would be $40,564,440. The Silver Lake Regional School District level service budget for FY26 is $244,783. After deducting anticipated circuit breaker reimbursement of $2.5 million, there's a difference of $2,180,343 that the administrative team met numerous times to address. And on the following slides, you can see for Tier 1 cuts, the Tier 1 cuts were $150,792. These cuts have been already made and are reflected in the budget spreadsheet that I uploaded into the school committee packet. In the Tier 1 cuts, the technology budget was reduced by $50,000. The curriculum budget was reduced $80,792. New gym, music, and art equipment at $3,000 was eliminated from the budget. Supply lines were reduced by $14,500, and we reduced some subscriptions by $2,500. Keeping in mind, in the bottom left-hand corner of this slide, we're heading towards a 2% increase goal, which is $2.18 million in cuts. For Tier 2, we eliminated $638,490 from the budget. In order to do that, late buses were eliminated, that's $36,780. Safety supervisor positions were eliminated for $24,000. Data coaches, $14,000. High school athletic stipends for $331,000. Freshman athletics, $60,000. High school extracurricular stipends, $77,000. Middle school athletic stipends, $10,600. Middle school extracurricular stipends, $10,110, and the athletic trainer contract for $75,000.
If I may just jump in before you get to the next slide, we have not eliminated them in the budget that's in your folder. These are just projected reductions.
So the budget's in the folder is the level service budget. Tier 3, $1,580,000. This is where you see a reduction in force. on this is 4 full-time equivalent SLEA support service positions for $23,000, $230,000. I'm sorry, I've been in meetings since 8:30 this morning, my brain's fried. 3 full-time equivalent SLE aides, $70,000, 16 FTE Unit A faculty, $975,000, 2 FTE SLAA members, $240,000. I put a note at the bottom of this. This will require an increase to unemployment, which is estimated at up to $14,000 per eligible staff member. The increase in unemployment costs may be offset by a reduction in insurance cost. I can't make any judgments about whether that's going to be a break even or until I would know who the people are and whether they who the people are, what they make, how much we expect them to get in unemployment, and whether they take benefits or not.
This is for the special education office in the integrated preschool. We have some decreases that we have cut. We have cut another full-time teacher, a paraprofessional. We've taken out all the subscriptions and memberships, special education tech support licenses. The figures that go along with those cuts are over there. We do have some professional development facilitators that we have a focus on pre-K curriculum that we're using, which is free from Boston Public Schools, but we do need facilitators for that. Bilingual IEP services. There are some expenses for interpretation and translations for our students that our ELL students, as well as our bilingual students whose heritage language is not English. As a beyond 2% budget request, we were asked to put in the NEC partnership classroom and also the shared cost for the IEP team chairs, realizing that we're in a very tight budget season. These are highly unlikely, but they're put in mainly for the vision and the strategic planning as we move forward as a district.
So again, I would just reiterate that these are not currently in a level service budget. They are just here to show you, under different circumstances, what we would have recommended.
So at the middle school, the budget was really slimmed down last year because of our budget conversations, so I don't have many decreases in that area. Of course, staff salary is the biggest place where we need an increase in funds. We don't have any confirmed retirements, which I also know, makes that line difficult sometimes to balance. But beyond level services, beyond the 2%, I do have 9, possibly 10 students coming up in the Developmental Learning Center that I do not currently have a classroom for, or another special education student for. So those are coming from the 3 elementary schools, and there would need to be some paraprofessionals to help service those students. And I know that you so blessingly gave me, the option of having my adjustment counselor there for those types of students for this year. And I would be remiss not to continue to advocate for that person. If we do continue, Sarah, you can move the slide. If we do continue with this 2% level service budget, and these tiered cuts, our general core classes, there may be increased in class size, and also there would be a reduction of the team model at the middle school. There could be possibly a density concern in regards to students, special education students in regular education classes and inclusion classes. That ratio may be over 50%, meaning that there may be more special ed students in those classes than general education students, and that is not best practice. There could be possible elimination of advanced course pathways to the high school, especially in regards to world language, if any world language teachers would be RIFT. In regards to electives and programming, like I said, and when I talked about the program of studies, there could be a new schedule. Right now we have 8 periods, which allows many students, all students, to have a diverse program of studies in their middle school experience. We would have to cut that down probably to 7 periods. We would have to reduce the course offerings, and the class sizes in those types of classes would increase upwards of 25 to 32 students. We also talked about late buses and late night supports that would also be reduced.
So at the high school, much like the middle school, we don't have any notable decreases because we cut a significant amount of things from our budget last year that we didn't look to restore this year given the budget uncertainty. There was a little bit of a decrease in our textbook requests. And as anybody who has purchased groceries or any other living expenses in the last several months, the cost of goods has gone up extraordinarily. So athletic expenses related to rentals, transportation, officials, those prices have gone up, and we'll speak later to a recommendation for some revenue sources there. The cost of general teaching supplies, materials, subscriptions to programs to support our curriculum, as well as organizations for staff development, all of those prices have increased. If we were looking beyond the 2%, just to give you an idea of the cost of restoring our special education teacher position, something that Chris Panarisi is recommending at this time, and per the school committee's request, we looked at adding a new program for CTE. The salary alone would be $85,000, and we haven't even talked about the addition of supplies, materials, or textbooks to run that program. And then within 2 to 3 years, we'd have to add a second staff member. Next slide. To try to help paint a little bit of a picture of what this type of a cut would look like. Because it requires more teaching positions, we would not be able to run the 8-period schedule, as I mentioned earlier tonight. We will have less flexibility in scheduling, and students may face challenges fitting required or desired courses into their schedules. Core classes such as math, science, ELA, and social studies must be prioritized, which would leave little room for electives, special programs, or our historically low enrollment courses. As a result, student schedules will become more rigid with fewer choices and less opportunity for personalized pathways. We risk being able to offer advanced classes, as there will be limited ability to offer AP or honors courses in order to remain compliant with student IEPs. More than 50% of students on a class roster cannot have an IEP. As a result, we'd have to run more CP1 level courses in lieu of AP and honors to ensure we remain in compliance. Cutting staff will also make it more difficult to support the co-top model. We'd see a reduction in extracurricular support. Fewer teachers would be available to lead or support clubs, teams, and other after-school programs, assuming we have the money to run them. We would also need to discuss the real possibility of changing local graduation requirements. And so just to give you an example of this, and purely an example, there's been no discussion of what's being cut or what would be cut. But we have some graduation requirements in art classes, we have graduation requirements in computer classes, and if we're not able to run those programs, we would have to make a change to our local grad requirements because students are expected to have those in order to get their diploma. Next slide, please, Sarah. Staffing cuts would mean fewer class sections can be offered, which would lead to overcrowding and additional schedule conflicts. The average student-to-teacher ratio would increase, exceeding the optimal learning environments, and we would see core content classes at more than 30 students per class. We would see reduced individual attention. It would be harder to respond to unexpected needs, such as accommodating students who need remediation, enrichment, or intervention. There would be little flexibility to adjust student classes mid-year. Contractually, we cannot require teachers to take on more classes or additional duties, but the increase to class sizes would limit their nominal time they already have for planning, grading, and collaboration. Existing classes would need to accommodate more students, which in many cases can increase the complexity of classroom management, differentiation, and providing individualized feedback. Certain courses require teachers with specific certifications. Staff cuts of this nature could result in not having the certified personnel to meet our needs, so multi-level or multi-grade classes would become necessary, affecting the quality of instruction. Larger class sizes and fewer course options will negatively impact student learning and achievement, as well as their overall high school experience. Fewer advanced or specialized courses will limit opportunities for students to prepare for higher education or specific career paths. As an example of what these cuts would mean on paper, If we lost 8 teachers at 5 sections each, we'd have up to 160 schedule holes per period. That's over 1,000 holes in our student schedules over the course of a scheduled day, at an average of 25 students per section currently. Students would have multiple directed studies in their schedule because we will not have a class to offer them. We wouldn't be able to run electives, or the class doesn't fit given the constraints of the schedule. Not bulleted but worth noting is that the cut to supplies and materials would require some families to provide their own learning supplies in art classes such as paper, paint, sketchbooks or art, sheet music for band, lab equipment for science, etc. And finally, Silver Lake Regional High School would no longer stand out as a school of distinction in our area. Cuts of this significance would compromise the overall quality of education for our students and the ability for us to retain highly qualified, motivated educators. I think that's all for my slides.
So this slide is a summary of costs beyond the 2%. So the level service budget that is in your packet, the line item budget, these are on the left-hand side is a list of things that are not included in there that were asked for tonight. And so that's the marketing teacher, an additional special ed teacher at the high school, increasing the adjustment counselor at the middle school to full-time, an additional special ed teacher at the middle school, and paraprofessionals to accommodate the students coming from 6th grade into 7th. Also, what is not in the preliminary budget is we are putting air conditioning into the middle school, and that will increase the electric bill by approximately $75,000. I estimate over the course of the year that cost isn't in there because it's a level service budget. So that would be an addition you would need to consider if we would like to turn the air conditioning on. And the $80,000, the 0.8 SRO, it's 0.8, they would be full-time for 10 months out of the 12 months of the year. So that's why it's 0.8 here with us, and 0.2 they would be with Kingston. So that's a total of $504,000 that would be asks beyond the level service budget that you have in your folders. There are asks for pre-K and special education of $431,000 for the NECC partnership specialized autism classroom for $155,000, and shared cost team chairs for $276,000. And then shared cost needs, and this is a repeat from last year, finance and operations support of $250,000. We are under-resourced in the business office for the 4 districts that we run, and I am asking for an accountant and a school business manager.
So our next steps are for you to begin reviewing the numbers that we presented with you tonight, answer any questions with regards to this presentation or the budgetary numbers that Sarah has put in your packet. We will also continue to work with SAFER to review the capital plan priorities and consider how we are going to engage with community stakeholders in terms of what budget will the school committee propose. And we'll also be looking for you for direction in terms of what additional information you may need or next steps that you would like us to take prior to our next school committee meeting.
Can we go back to the grid slide, page
Yes.
6, I think? So remind me what constitutes other services, the 3,000?
The 3,000 lines are student services, which is nursing, extracurricular activities. The dramatic increase in the 3,000 lines is because athletics previously had been budgeted and paid out of an instruction line, and all of the coaches and all of the extracurricular stipends were paid out of an instruction line. They don't belong there. They belong in the 3,000 accounts, and that's the dramatic increase from FY25 to FY26 in the 3,000s.
Which then is suppressing what the increase in the 2000s line would have looked like if they were done apples to apples.
Apples to apples are,
Because they were in the instruction line previously.
right, so apples to apples comparisons are extremely difficult with the way the budget was previously done in this district, because sometimes even within a budget line, there were multiple different things in the line that were unrelated and should
Okay,
have been elsewhere.
but the majority, I mean, 2,000 under regular ed, a 1.4% increase is not close to what the escalators would be in the teacher contract and the regular kind of other salary contracts.
Correct.
And so the fact that that is not accurate, the vast majority of that money is wound up in 3,000, is what it looks like to me.
I agree.
Okay. So just for clarity, like I said, I kind of wanted the big buckets. The first big bucket is annual increases. The second big bucket would be $800,000 in special ed. And then the third, I would say, would be like sundries, kind of everything else accumulated.
Can you explain the $800,000 in special ed?
It's more like one.
Where's that number coming from?
Maybe I did the math wrong in my
It's the
mind.
difference between
Like 1.5.
47 and 54.
It's, let's see.
The special
Sorry,
ed 2,000
was-
accounts?
Oh, 2,000.
It's the difference between the 4.7
I'm looking at the 4.3 and the 5.8.
and the 5.
Yeah, sorry, that's 1.3. Right. I was looking over it, I messed up the lines, but yeah. So that's 1.3.
1.8.
And, sorry, go ahead, Kristen.
So you would want an explanation for that. So if we look at the students that are transitioning from grade 6 to grade 7 who are out of district, that makes up about $500,000, which is 11% of the increase that we're looking at. And then if we look at the extraordinary pricing increasing that the state has authorized some of those out-of-district schools, it's a total of $212,000, which makes up 4% of that difference. So we're looking at about 15% of that 17% increase actually being from the kids transitioning from grade 6 to grade 7, as well as the extraordinary increases in special education tuitions by Amigo, Cardinal Cushing, and Ivy Street. When I did the actual dollar for dollar, and I used just the 3%, not what the state allows us for out-of-district tuitions, which is 3.67, the actual money that I came up with was a decrease of $31,803.85 if we did not have transitioning students moving up, but we do. So that number is probably, unless we have students transitioning out who are out of district, and remember special education students go to age 22, that number we can expect to see increasing, and that percentage is going to look a little wonky every single year. But I can drill it down and let you know that, again, 500,000 of that is coming from grade 6 to grade 7, and 212,000 of that is coming from the state's authorization for extraordinary higher tuitions.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I guess one of my questions, what have the principals considered in terms of increasing revenues? Sports fees, when was the last time the $300 per student per year fee was increased? How many students participate in sports? because just by math of 800 students, if you increased it $150, would be a substantial increase to tuition paid in, that might be able to offset some of those increases. Not that I'm trying to recommend this on behalf of the committee, it's just I think I'm trying to consider how to save some of this. And then, I think the answer is no, but are we able to charge a CTE tuition? No, thank you.
We, at our SAFER meeting earlier tonight, we discussed the potential increase to athletic registration fee and user fees. Mr. Swanson and I presented the change. Mark was going to talk a little bit about it under his report this evening.
We're going to bring you those numbers at our next meeting, and we'll clarify some of the increased fees to match our fees with area towns.
But
An overall increase, the total and bottom line was $72,000 in revenue sources from fees assessed to students.
It could be more than that.
I think it would, no, I actually think it would increase our revenue by about $50,000.
We got a 72 number based on what was presented, but we need to finalize those numbers to bring them to the full committee next week.
Okay.
And next month.
If I may, one other thing, I guess, kind of tied in with that, and I guess it would have to be something that we'd all have to approve as well. But I've heard recently that other schools allow students that are participating in sports or athletics to offset that gym requirement. And I'm wondering if we did something like that, then we'd have an increase in user fees, which could offset some of these overall fees.
So,
Not to.
You want to take it?
And provide
so wellness is actually one of our graduation requirements.
It's also a state requirement.
Yeah.
So there's an actual health and wellness curriculum. So it's not just about
And I will
playing
say,
tennis.
the schools who do it, we ask the principals, how do you do this? And
Right.
they just haven't been audited or
Compliant?
reprimanded yet. So,
yeah, it's not
So it's
allowed.
possible, it's just not legal.
Yes.
I don't want to get any brother or sister towns in trouble, but
If I can jump in, so where I teach, we do not have that option, but we were handing out gym waivers to kids who wanted to do electives, basically like candy, and we did get audited, and we had to go in the other direction and increase gym enrollments, so,
I don't want to get in trouble.
yeah.
Can we add it as an elective after school? I mean, I know that sounds horrible. Can we ask our coaches to teach something?
Well, because it's not an elective technically. They have to take it every year.
It's the in-curriculum and extracurricular.
Well, that answered like 16 questions in one.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Gym is important, health is important.
How are other schools doing it that they don't do that? If there's a state curriculum?
So if
I
you
don't
don't get caught, there's no ramifications. But it's not the right thing to do. And I couldn't endorse it. I mean, we just spent 2 years untangling our own problems that were done mistakenly.
I didn't know it was illegal. All right. Can't apply fee.
Decades of inappropriate accounting. Fixed in 2.
It was a good idea. Come on.
I mean, maybe we can apply for a waiver from the state. I can look into it.
Thanks.
Amy, go ahead.
So kind of related to that, I noticed in the Tier 2 cuts, a lot of the Tier 2 cuts were related to stipends paid to, I'm guessing, extracurricular advisors and coaches. And so I'm inferring here, I could be way off mark, that means you would be offering fewer sports after school and fewer extracurriculars, but then wouldn't that do the opposite in terms of increased user fees? If we're not offering these programs,
Correct.
kids aren't going to be paying for them.
Right.
Correct. And to clarify, that is all of our sports, not just some of them.
So then
In Tier
we would
2.
have to take, has that loss of user fees been included in the cuts?
Wait, that would be all of the sports.
If you go back to
Yes.
I
Tier
saw the
2,
331, and then I saw freshmen.
we separated out freshmen from all because we did not know what ultimately the will of the committee would be. So we wanted to have that number ready for you.
So that's saying we would not do sports extra,
Exactly.
okay?
Or,
Can we get the public
or
involved now?
extracurricular activities at all.
Really?
That's what slide 10 represents.
So that's that 3,000 counts. So the 2,000 is instruction, it happens bell to bell within the school day, that's where a school, we do instruction. The 3,000
I wouldn't
accounts,
want to send my kid.
other than nursing, is,
Right.
is pupil services.
I thought there was another hand raised. Was there another hand raised over here?
I think it was Sarah.
No, I said it.
Okay. Sarah, a handful of clarifying questions that are sort of outside the bounds here. You noted that we don't budget debt retirement. Can you explain that a little bit? Because we're absolutely paying debt, and I think we retire.
It doesn't come out of the operating budget. So we don't budget it as part of the operating budget.
Okay, so it's coming out of what theoretically?
Out
Or
of
realistically?
a separate account.
How much is it?
I can get that number for you?
Because I believe it's supposed to retire in 27.
Yes.
Okay.
And it's paid by the member, it comes into us as a part of the assessment from the member towns. It goes into an account and we pay it out.
That's what I remember.
I'd like to know what that amount is. What's that?
What we have left in debt? Or what we're
I'd like to
paying?
know what we're paying. I'd like to know what we have left in debt.
Can we finance the budget? Then we can have- It's $45 million.
The second question I had is we passed a so-called millionaire's tax in Massachusetts allegedly to help the schools, so I'm wondering where the money is.
The governor's budget hasn't come out and the Chapter 70 money hasn't come out, so I don't know what our Chapter 70 funding is. I believe we got somewhere around $11 million last year. I don't know if it's going to be 11 million, give or take, or 15, or I don't know. So that I expect will be coming out to all schools as publicly at the end of January.
And just another point to make, sometimes people say, why don't we come out with our budget sooner? The reality is there Chapter 70 and the governor's budget are big question marks, especially in a year where you're looking at cuts this steep. So again, just to reiterate and to remind people, the reason why the preliminary comes out now is because we don't even have real numbers in many of these areas until January.
I have one question.
Yep, go ahead.
So you presented the 2% budget and the level service budget, and I assume the tiers 1, 2, and 3 are your choices of adding back in.
No.
No.
Those are the reductions.
I see them as reductions. Do we work backwards to come up
So
with tiers?
from the level service budget, tier 1, 2, and 3 bring
cuts.
back down to 2%.
But tier
Right.
one's already.
So at the administration, we, I believe, asked for a 2% budget, and we added add backs to bring us back in a prioritized order of what was important. What you're saying is that, are the tiers prioritized so that we bring first like tier 3 back in, then tier 2, and then tier 1?
Yes.
Or are they,
And these haven't been reduced yet. We'd have to vote to reduce these.
I understand all the voting, but I'm waiting for the administration to tell us what they would like to bring back in what order, and I just want to understand. Tier 3 then basically is the
Priority.
$1.6 million is your priority to bring back first. If we were going to go from the 2% back towards the level service budget.
If I may, I believe the reason that tier 2, and I mean this respectfully, is considered the most priority right now is because it includes all of our staffing. But I do believe that the school committee has autonomy over these tiers to say, we can keep some of the, say, athletics, but then we would have to eliminate them somewhere else, which would mean maybe
Right.
taking some staffing away to keep things. So, Not that I'm trying to prioritize athletics, but at this point. I know.
I'm just saying of $1.6 million cuts in Tier 3, which would be what you'd add back, I think it probably time to prioritize some of those back in the order that you would bring those back into the budget towards level service.
So,
Well, Mark, I
you would
think,
like Tier 3 to be prioritized? Is that what you're saying?
Well, what I'm saying is that I believe we were asking for things to bring back from level, if we start at 2%, we work our way back towards level service, what would be your order of what you would consider important? And I assumed that level 3 were the things that you seemed most important to bring back. But if 1.6 million, that's a pretty broad spectrum. Can you bring back $500,000 or not? Got as many teachers, whatever. And this is probably a thought process that will take more time.
Again, we would prefer not to do that unless we know that you're going to ask us to actually move forward with that budget, because whatever your number is, we will work with that. But the reality is that number influences what can stay and what can go. So if you don't have athletics, you don't need a trainer. But if you do have athletics, you do need a trainer. So it becomes very difficult without another number for us to give you a prioritized list.
Dr. Brewer, I think you guys have done a good job with the tier 1, 2, 3 in terms of, like Mark just said, if we had all of the money that we needed to bring this forward. I think more importantly, because we don't have the Chapter 70 and the other numbers that we're waiting on from the state to the end of the month. Pardon?
We never have a complete picture.
But, I mean, I know that last year we took our budget all the way into April before approving. I don't think that that's a good idea for any of the towns this year, but I would personally like to hold off on any kind of votes tonight until, A, the public's weighed in on our public budget hearing on February 12th or 13th. And then also that we get more of a feel from the towns at the meeting on the 16th, which is a joint meeting, which is also going to be our shared cost budget, to see if there's feelers out there for an override. I think at this point, particularly with the way the Kingston's budget looked the other day and this, I mean, there would be no doubt that Kingston would need an override to pass any of these budgets this year. And we don't know if we have the support of the select board yet for that, to bring something like that to town meeting. So we don't know. Too many unknowns.
so Jean, if I'm hearing you correctly, you're saying you don't want to vote any direction yet until we've had the public hearing next week.
The numbers from the state, the end of the month, and the public weigh in, because I do think that similar to our art classes that are extremely important and our music classes that are extremely important and all of our electives that our, say, non-academic learners come to school for and strive to do well in, I think there's other kids that only come to school for athletics. And I would hate to see an entire program go and kids absolutely hate coming to school every day. I don't want to prioritize athletics over academics, but I do think that there's a balance in high school, and that's something that's part of the culture.
Jill, do you have any response to that on the not taking direction tonight?
I think that, I don't think there's, I think that's fine. The only kind of direction I do think we do need tonight is if there's particular questions that we didn't answer for you tonight that you want us to present next time, I guess would be my caveat. Like if you want something in particular, please let us know so that we can prepare it.
So what I would like to know, I mean, Jean's stride, we'd like to know what the state money is going to be, but I would also like to know what is the debt payment?
Yep.
I have that for you.
Okay,
So the May payment of 2025 for the middle school is $791,000. The May payment for the high school is $1,544,800. In FY '26, I'm sorry, in 2026, the May payment for the middle school is $702,125. The May payment for the high school in 2026 is $1,454,125. In 2027, there is no longer a payment for the middle school. In May of 2027, the payment for the high school is $759,200.
sorry, what was the middle school before? So there's 700 from the high school, and tell me when the high school retires too.
The high school's final payment is May of 2027, $759,200.
It's a half payment.
Okay, and the middle school's retirement then is earlier than that.
Is earlier.
And how much is their payment?
$702,125 in.
Okay, so right now we're paying $1.4 million per month for debt that is related to the building of and the separation and the complex and everything like that, okay? And it's all gone precisely 2 years from the end of this fiscal year,
Yes.
correct? Okay. And I know that there's some hope of using some slot, so to speak, of that money to be able to do things like the admin building and other things like that. But that's such a significant amount of money, I think that we do have to come forward with all options. So one of my questions would be, are there any possibilities of refinancing it, and possibly lowering it or extending it or something like that? Or in lieu of doing that, do we have a way of doing something that is a get you by for a year, 18 months or whatever, that keeps us keeping on with athletics and a right-sized faculty?
It's a good idea, Gordon.
So I think you got to research that, is what I'm asking. I don't expect you to be
I will
able
speak with
to.
the treasurer about refinancing the debt.
Okay.
If we're taking a late fee every month.
What's that?
If we're taking a late fee every month to kind of defer it a little bit, might be cheaper than,
Pay more interest,
Right.
extend it out.
I mean, literally to Jean's point, if you didn't pay it for 2 months.
We pay it as a lump sum.
Every month, every May.
Oh,
Every
so-
May.
Every May, okay.
I think the total is about 2.2 million this year, between the two. Is that correct?
we just don't have to take it.
So, yeah. So
We don't
please
have our
explore
door.
that. That's not something I would like to do, and I would like to have sort of the core capital involved for administration and some other things like that, building projects that need to get done. But if we need to do something like rent a space separately or whatever, I'm much more interested in programs and people than I am in facilities. So we are close enough there, and it just seems like it would be utterly ridiculous to be 2 years out from an increase that sizable of freed up cash. And, not just cut our noses off to spite our face, but disfigure our whole face entirely. So,
I do point out, I believe if you're going to change the debt, we have to go to all 3 town meetings, get approval for that.
I mean,
They all
It's early enough.
approved the
so,
original votes.
but think of what you're selling
I'm
there.
not saying there's a problem, I'm just
Yeah.
saying it's a process.
I'm just saying, think of what you're selling there. We're about to tell the towns, in an area where nobody wants to talk about raising taxes, all right? And keep in mind, the taxes actually go up every year. It's not a matter of them not going up. They go up every year. They just don't go up sufficiently to cover what we're talking about. So if we go to the towns and we say, your kids will have no after-school activities. They won't have any means of getting home on late buses. They're going to be in 32 people classrooms, and et cetera, et cetera. Or you can pay an extra X amount, or we can, refinance what is a sliver of debt that is left, or do something other with that. I mean, there's you could theoretically take a home equity line, so to speak. You could borrow against your theoretical equity because there's equity in what you're paying. So there are a number of different ways theoretically to do it. I mean, I'm much more familiar with consumer rules than I am with, public buildings or something like that. But theoretically, you should be able to do something like borrow against your equity or refinance your debt in such a way that you're not having to raise taxes and you meet your budgets and you're not really hurting yourself terribly in not retiring that debt in time.
The debt was refinanced in 2015. There were considerable savings at that time. It's possible legal, we can do it. I will speak to the treasurer when I see him.
Okay. And I'm sure that the interest rates were amazing, and so we were probably able to basically hold payments at the same level without and cut our interest costs. So yes, if you could explore that. What's that?
I don't think they were amazing in 2015. I think they were probably comparable to right now for interest rates.
Okay.
There was a significant savings
Because of the refinance.
because of the refinance.
Right. But I'm saying that, I like Gordon's idea, I would second that. I would also request that, I'm sorry, go ahead.
But I was going to move on to something else, so
Oh, I was going to say, I would request that the principals look at other sources of revenue if we were to retain athletics, ways to increase users or athletes so that there's more fees coming in to offset those deficits. Also, perhaps by sport or the annual increase by year. So,
Yeah, and we'll speak to that, I think, under Mark's report, the
Thank you.
recommendation for user fee increases.
Right.
That, and you might have to go to the public with Save Silver Lake Athletics. You got to raise $450,000.
Right.
And between businesses and people and things like that, it's a voluntary tax as opposed to a required tax, which theoretically is more fair. But that's the type of thing. But we should at least look at what our debt situation is, and if there is a way to, again, not hurt ourselves in the long term. It's a great thing to retire debt, but we're just 2 years away from it. So it seems crazy not to, have something to do there. All right, anything else on this topic, Sarah?
the only other thing I was going to say is that we have submitted E&D to DOR, and I'm just waiting to hear back. Hopefully next time we talk, E&D will be certified, and that will be something that we'll also have on the table in addition to the governor's numbers.
Okay. All right, we need committee reports. So, Silver Lake Education Association, you're up first.
Good evening. My name is Jess Drew. I'm the president of the Silver Lake Education Association. Over the past decade, at least, the school committee has asked our schools to cut faculty and staff positions, either through straight-out cuts or through the school committee's decision to not fill a position. Year after year, supplies have been cut, consumables have been cut, programs have been cut, textbooks and databases have been cut, all to the detriment of our students who no longer have access to these tools that they need to be successful in today's world. Some examples of areas that have been and will continue to be affected by these proposed cuts include basic supplies like pencils, paper, tape, and whiteboard markers, textbooks, athletics programs, clubs and activities, research and analytical tools, one-on-one support, and more. Our children are directly paying the price. While these cuts have been occurring, the school committee and district leaders have also required the faculty, staff, and building level administrators to consistently do more with less. Implement these new programs with less. Meet the goals that we have set for you without your input with less. Score higher with less. Keep our children safe for less. The SLEA recognizes that financial resources are finite, and yet to ask administrators to see Tier 3 cuts and to simultaneously question the efforts of our staff or the reason why goals are not being met is asinine. The SLEA is also appalled by the fact that the central office is requesting several positions to be added at this time. We recognize that theirs is a shared cost, but the office has survived over a decade without these positions and now is absolutely not the time to add them while putting student-facing faculty and staff on the chopping block. It is not only insensitive, but it is out of touch. These proposed cuts have and will continue to gut our schools and our programs, destabilizing our children's chances of gaining the skills and the knowledge that they need to be competitive and successful in their futures. Proposed cuts have and will continue to dilute faculty and staff's ability to ensure best practices in the classroom. They have and will continue to erode our children's education. We're not talking about 1 year of cuts here. We have been asked to cut year after year after year. There's only so much you can ask us to bleed, and there is nothing left. Our schools cannot sustain staff cuts, especially as our towns continue to grow. We are calling for the school committee to step up with their leadership. Despite there being a tumultuous relationship between the school committee and the teachers union in the past, it is time that we collaborate and work together to help the community see that the requests of our schools are not outrageous. As elected officials, please communicate to your constituents that this is not frivolous spending. Spending that supports education also lowers crime, increases property value, and has multiple other positive effects on the community. Please hold the line with the towns and do not let our children down by asking them to attend schools that have been decimated by the cuts that you're asking us to make. Thank you.
Any questions or thoughts or anything from the group?
I would echo Mrs. Drew's statements regarding things that we need to advocate for on behalf of our students. We are elected to the committee to advocate for our students, also to represent the taxpayers, but to advocate for our students. And I think that this budget does not do that, as Dr. Prue outlined in her opening statement about it. This budget does not even meet the required needs of our students, and as we all know, that when we do not provide services that our students need, which is why I'm such a firm believer in keeping children busy with athletics and after-school activities, then we're going to be pushing children into categories of not wanting to be at school, requiring more services, requiring perhaps, other services to keep them engaged in the curriculum or to even want to be here in the first place. So it's going to be a higher expense down the road. We'd be kicking the can down the road and offering our students less. And one of my biggest frustrations during COVID was the amount of things that our children lost out on that we had zero control over. We were told no, we were continually told that it was not legal to, the kids didn't even have sports in 2020. The kids didn't have a high school graduation until August of 2020, thankfully, because Mrs. Gill provided one. Many schools did not. And I didn't even have a child in high school during the pandemic, and I'm still heartbroken for all the things that those children missed out on. And I would hate to see something like that happen that we have control over. So, sorry.
Recognition from the chair.
Yeah, go ahead.
I would ask the SLEA to refrain from divisive statements such as out of touch. The reality is that there were lots of positions presented tonight for the school committee to recognize that a level service doesn't even meet our needs. When you say things like that, you're dividing us, and we are one. We serve a purpose. We also serve the children of this community. And without an effective and appropriate and reliable budget, those things don't happen. So again, I'm just asking you to keep that in mind. We're not the enemy. We don't want to see these cuts, but we don't have control over whether or not people can afford this education. That's out of our hands. We need to appeal to the town, not by pointing fingers, but by explaining to them why we need these materials for the children and why it's important for kids and how it was provided to them. It's part of our democratic society. It's part of what keeps us free. No one enjoys paying taxes, but it's our obligation to our children to make sure it's done in order to remain free. So again, I'm going to ask you from the bottom of my heart to please consider that. We are asked to present these numbers. It doesn't mean that we're happy about it. Thank you.
Yep.
All set.
Okay. I appreciate what you said. There are one or two things I might quibble with, but I don't think it's worth the quibbling effort. The one thing that I really kind of want to warn you about is I don't have a problem making a case that we unitedly stand up and make a case for, but I want you to be realistic about like the temperature in the community that I'm from. We tried to pass a very small adjustment to participate in the I don't know, what do they call it, the community something or other.
Community compact.
Yeah, and it was amounted to $80 I don't know, a year or something like that. I mean, it was an absurdly small number, which with the money that goes into it plus whatever's matched from the state, has like an incredible repayment that would have spared the community from having to come up with funds and things like that for, when playgrounds go to hell and when you've got to do things to upkeep the beaches and everything like that. And people rallied around, we're not increasing the taxes no matter what, and voted it down. I heard from some leadership that they were pleased that the vote was, like 54-46 or something like that or whatever, but it wasn't terribly close. And they voted it down with all kinds of, notions of it's going to be used to shoehorn affordable housing and things like that. The town just voted down a redistricting of one area that already has affordable housing in it and would not have required us to add affordable housing. It just would have met the state requirement. It would have met the state requirement for having a district for affordable housing, and the town voted it down, voted to be, out of compliance with the state mandate, which can get the town sued and can cause a loss of grants and everything like that. And the vote was 700-7 or something to that effect. So changing all of those minds is a battle, and I just want you to be realistic about it. I think there's been more demonstrable support in Kingston in particular. Halifax is a tough place to sell even an extra point.
Although to counter that extra point for this year's budget, I almost wish that we had that extra percentage in Kingston for this year, because it would make a huge difference for this budget. So it might be beneficial in the short term to not have that yet. In the long term, absolutely. Please absolutely make it this year.
Okay. Admin review. I don't know that we have anybody from admin review here.
Jeannie and I are on admin review.
We met. We met on Tuesday. We have, we'll be presenting it to the Joint 31 Union Committee on the 16th. And
On the 13th?
sorry. Next week. Next week. Yes.
Okay, CTE?
No update.
No update, okay. I don't have any correspondence to report. Our legislative agent is not here. Anything on negotiations? I don't think we have anything active right now.
There
PAC?
was no PAC meeting this month.
Okay, policy?
We met yesterday, and at the next meeting, we're going to be presenting probably about a dozen policies.
Okay. Safer?
We just met prior, we'll be meeting again as prior to the February 13th meeting. We've made some changes to our agenda to try to get materials in 48 hours prior when the meeting is posted, so everybody has time to be presented. We've added a business services report and a superintendent's report to our agenda to try to get clarity on the direction the administration would like to take regarding facilities and other related issues. We recommended some changes to the facilities, building use facilities fees to an effort to generate some revenue, and we'll be presenting those to you on February 13th with our refinements we'll discuss right before the meeting. We've got, we looked at the user fees for athletic fields and, for sports, to go up on those so that we're in the middle of the range right now, maybe a little higher on the on some of the sports to try to recover some revenue. And the number we got on the initial presentation was around $70,000. I'd just like to point out these are pretty low-hanging fruit, but they all do count for revenue stream that would help offset some of the cuts we've got to make in other places. It's a shame we can't offer everything free, and we can't say to our communities they can all come in and use our school facilities. You have to pay janitors, custodians, rather, and maintain and everything down to the toilet paper. So, folks, it's an expense, and we have to cover those going forward. We talked about the middle school HVAC, and we are going to put out some more bids to see if we get a clerk for the works. That project's scheduled to start over the summer. Hindsight's always 20/20, but we should have probably focused some of that HVAC money that we're using for middle school air conditioning, especially based on what the business manager highlighted in her presentation of that $75,000 extra electricity, perhaps to repair some of the units that we have existing that are on their 20-year stipend and need to be replaced. But we are going to get an upgrade in the middle school units by putting the AC part in them. We are going to get updated parts to keep the units up to date and hopefully get some longevity out of it, because those units are also involved in heating, which I think is very important. We got adult education. Did you want to talk about that, Michaela, at all?
I did not, but I can if you'd like me to.
Yes, would you?
Sure.
That program's either in swing or on the way of registration?
Yep, so we just recently, not broadcast, advertised our program of courses for this year's adult ed classes. They range from knife cutting, meal planning and prepping. There's some real estate courses, raising chickens. There's yoga, working with metal fabrication. There's a whole host of classes provided by both staff members and community members. Some of those classes are free, some have a nominal cost to cover supplies. There's like a wood carving class. You can make a little duck or mallard for your mantle. So if you or community members are interested, we encourage you to sign up for those courses. It's a good opportunity for
Thank you. And
to learn something
as
new.
one of those programs, not this time, but on the future, we're looking at trying to provide some education on how to become a wastewater treatment plant operator, which is a high-yield job for a lot of folks. Involves a lot of environmental science, and would be a great career choice for our students and our adults in the community. We have a facility here at the high school that people probably don't know about. It's behind the school that actually is set up to teach in as a classroom, and we've got some state and outside help looking at bringing a program here to Silver Lake that would allow folks to get certified. And this could be a revenue maker, not a big item, but certainly something. Basically, we have a free classroom that we're not using that's out there that maybe we can use. So, and other than that, that's all I got from Steve.
Okay. Treasurer's report.
Yeah, there we go. All right, we have 19 vendor warrants for a total of $1,514,255. We have middle school and high school activities totaling, accounts totaling, warrants totaling $29,576.56. That is the accounts payable at $1,819,896.38 for a total of $3,392,030.14. Thank you.
Okay. Union 31.
I mentioned we're meeting on the 16th for the joint meeting. That's also meeting with all three towns, including the town administrators. And we do welcome Finance Committee and Board of Selectmen to join those meetings so they can be brought up to speed.
Have you distributed that budget presentation to the towns yet?
The budget presentations and the line item budgets will be posted on the district website under the Department of, the Business Department. There's a side tab for budgets. Once the budget is presented to the school committee, you get first dibs on it. It will then be posted. So I'm going to be, the Kingston budget and the presentation are already posted. I'll be posting the Silver Lake budgets tomorrow, and I'll be posting the Halifax budgets after our meeting next Tuesday. And then, so if you go on the website, the presentation as well as the line item budgets are there.
Okay.
Thank you.
Single signature warrants.
Yes, hang on. We had a special warrant at the end of December for $156,083.15.
All right. I believe that brings us to the end. So, what's that?
Motion to adjourn.
So, I'll send us off on, I'm just saying, these are just incredibly difficult discussions. They just are. What we are contemplating, or what we're contemplating, is incredibly difficult. And, you know, there's a human aspect of it for all of us. All of us have, you know, people directly affected, and I appreciate the passion on all sides of it. I know everybody's got really the best for kids and community and so forth in mind, and I'm okay with you know, kind of the intensity of the feeling that folks have, and we're going to do our level best to make something of it, and see if we can hang on by our fingernails and get to a better day. All right, can I get a motion for adjournment?
So moved. Second.
All right, roll call. Lucas?
Yes.
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming out too and spending the time.